our February meeting of the Recce Steering Committee. So just real quick on the agenda, we've got a standing update on the award status. So Kevin will talk us through that really quickly. Liz has a presentation around the equitable engagement approach that they'd like to take so that everyone kind of knows their approach. And there were some supporting materials that were both attached. When I sent out the agenda, they're also on the shared drive. We do have a discussion item around the technical advisory group. I will be sending out a post-meeting survey, so we'll talk more about that a little later. But I want to flag that in case people have to jump off early, that we do hope to get your input. And then update on workforce development grant piece, and then upcoming meetings and next steps, and pretty full agenda. So I will kick it over to Kevin.
Yeah, we have no real further updates. DOE is still processing our paperwork. We've got a few small things to get into them now. They just emailed us yesterday, but no real updates there. So I think at this point, the only update is to say that if we don't have the conditions removed from the award by the end of, excuse me, by the end of this month, so 2 weeks from today, then we will start to strategize a way to do simple modifications to pause the work and extend things out so that we can get the funding in before we begin the public engagement. So we got 2 weeks until we have to do that. And I've heard that one team out of the 27 has a contract signed. I've also heard that 0 teams have a contract signed at this point. So I think we're at the front of the line, but we'll see.
But big but. And for those of you who might not have heard some of the earlier conversations, the reason why Kevin and I need to entertain like putting a pause on the project is we, and correct me, Kevin, if I'm misstating this, we technically have the award. It just has conditional terms and conditions, which until DOE modifies, removes the conditional TNCs and adds the final ones, while the funding is encumbered and has been quote unquote awarded, we cannot touch it.
So the funding's obligated. It's not a question of whether or not we got the funding, and the next round of Recce funding should come out any day now. So, I mean, it's in the bag. We just have to get the paperwork finalized. So yeah, it's a modification technically to the award that we're waiting on. The modification will remove the conditions. And I don't think, I mean, it sounds dramatic maybe to pause the work, but I don't think it's necessarily that big of a deal. It will definitely require more of the budget be consumed in reconfiguring timelines and resubmitting, or reworking on our project management plans Gantt chart. But we have a few options there, and NBI has done that in the past. So you can do a no-cost extension, or we can just push some budget period 1 milestones into budget period 2.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So if we get to the end of the month, Kevin and I'll talk through some options. The reason why it's an issue is because we cannot access the funds. All of the wonderful technical partners that you see on this call that have been helping us kind of move things along and get like the initial elements of the project in place do not have a mechanism yet to be reimbursed for their time. And so I'm very unwilling to launch into a full public process without that being in place. It's just not fair to the partners. We really appreciate what they've been willing to do so far since October. And we just don't want to strain that any farther. And certainly not once you start to involve a lot of the public, it doesn't make sense. So if we get to the end of this month, we haven't heard from DOE, and Kevin's been doing a really good job of pushing them, of saying, hey, this is going to start really impacting milestones and deliverables.
Yeah, we have communicated
we'll
that.
See.
So
we will see. All right. Okay, so we just wanted to let everybody know kind of where that stands. We'll keep working on it. But then let's get to the bulk of this. David, did you change your slides at all?
Yeah, slightly. I think we have a
Okay,
different, we added a slide at the end to
okay.
open it up to questions when we're concluding.
Cool. I will stop sharing. I'll let you do your presentation, and then afterwards, if you want to send me the updated slides, I will switch it out for what's in the PowerPoint on the shared drive.
Perfect. Can everybody see my slides all right?
Yep.
Good. Thank you, Leslie. I really appreciate it. And good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David Longoria, Program Officer for Economic Development and Healthy Communities for LISC Phoenix. We're really excited to see the continued momentum and dedication from the entire group, the whole steering committee, toward advancing our shared goals of resilience and equity in building code implementation. Today, I have the privilege of introducing one of our partners at Insight Consultants as we delve a little bit deeper into the critical topic of power sharing with communities around climate resilience and effective community engagement. And this includes our equitable facilitation strategy as well that we'll get in, a little bit into with this brief presentation. Our goal is really to strengthen our collective understanding and guide our collaborative efforts moving forward through this work. And we hope to convey this with this brief presentation and answer any questions you all might have at its conclusion. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our trusted partner at Insight, Mary Stevens. Mary?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're at. My name is Mary Stevens, and I'm one of the co-founders at Insight Consultants. Given what the update, we actually might move through this a little bit quicker, considering this will throw off our timeline slide. But what we wanted to do is just offer an update and some of our thinking about what community engagement looks like for this, for RESI, especially this year. Obviously, things will change as we learn and get feedback. But we've created a timeline on slide 3 that shares with you a little bit of our thinking. And we think it's important early in the process to give you a sense of where we're at and get your feedback. So in this slide, power sharing with communities, we just want to introduce you to the term that we use to describe equity. So we don't use that term very often. We use the term power sharing. And so that's both an accountability practice and also an aspiration. So we're constantly asking and consistently asking in all the work that we do, what is the power sharing mechanism and what is the power sharing strategy that we're going to be moving forward through the RECI project with? And so we can advance the slide, David, please. A little bit about our methodology. We work in 3 very basic ways, but they're all interlocking. One is through power sharing, and that's thinking about the ways that we share resources, leadership, narrative, political power sharing, the wisdom at the margins. Our goal is to not only include, but center communities and leaders that have been historically marginalized from this process. In this case, that is Black, Native, Latinx, women-owned businesses, women-owned homes, low-income residents. Those are the folks that we're really thinking about when we think about the wisdom at the margins of this conversation. And then lastly, our own personal practice. What is the group work that we all have to do from our place of quote unquote expertise? And I don't say that in a condescending way. It's just there are multiple forms of expertise. What is the learning and unlearning that we have to do as a group to be safe for people to be a part of this project? David? We can advance. So obviously this will change a bit given what we've just heard, and that's actually okay with us. We anticipated that would happen, but this gives you a sense of how we're moving, especially for this year, maybe a little into the early of 2025. For the first part of this project in October, we engaged in a long research process. So we have lit reviews. We were meeting with experts across the nation, across the state, across the borders. Site visits, really to deeply understand what are the politics around this, what are the historical places. Pause. And so that was a very rich process for us. And now we're in the meeting phase. I've met with many of you. It's been very, very interesting. One, just to get to know people, but also to get to know the differing perspectives and entry points into this work. Hopefully, when funding comes in, we can move into the power sharing process, which is the work that we'll be doing with the equity advisory or the equity accountability partners, or formerly the committee, and the technical advisory group, as well as the CBOs. And then lastly, thinking about the learning sessions. Hopefully toward the end, The latter half, Q4 of 2024, we'll be able to start engaging in some public learning sessions. But again, that will be contingent on when funding comes in. I'm going to pass it over to David to go through this last slide, and that will conclude our presentation for today.
Thank you, Mary. Sorry, I'm just getting my talking points in order here. Sorry. So moving forward with our meetings, and this goes for both the core team that we're meeting with as well as this larger steering committee. We'd first like to propose a standard meeting rubric or a grounding approach around equitable engagement or inclusive facilitation. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty painless. And it really, more than anything else, is just a reflection of practicing the same ethical principles we propose carrying out with communities that we engage with within our own internal group structure with the steering committee. So the inside sort of matches the outside, so to speak. So with that in mind, around equitable facilitation, so the critical practice for us is really to promote safe and inclusive spaces. So reflecting our own ethics of equity and respect. We want to do such things as activating the chat in our regular meetings. So engaging participants by opening the chat up with reflective questions. This could include your location, the Indigenous lands acknowledgement, so if you know it in where you are. What is your morning drink preference? Just doing an overall temperature check. So how are you checking in? How is the day going? Just sort of those standard things that I think that we forget about. And I think that this hybridization of work has forgotten and left us sort of just staring at our screens all the time. And of course, obviously, what are the expectations for the meeting? Next is the equitable stack. So facilitating the discussion with equal participation, making sure that we're prioritizing historically marginalized voices, that positional power or expertise moves to the back while historically marginalized individuals move to the front. We want to engage heavily with listening, fostering equitable dialogue by avoiding those sort of right-wrong debates. So reflective responses to understand perspectives, encourage further exploration of ideas or concerns with genuine curiosity. The next portion of this slide is the Equity Accountability Partners, or the EAP, originally called the Equity Advisory Panel, I believe. The Equity Accountability Partners are community leaders and building experts dedicated to equity in housing and building codes. That's our real vision for who's going to make up this group. They're going to advise the RESI steering committee and the core team on strategic policies, accessibility, affordability, and diverse community voices. They will represent Native, Latinx, Black, and impacted communities with the focus on rural and tribal needs. And they will collaborate with the technical advisory group. And we hope that we have equal representation for both Arizona and New Mexico, as this is a joint geographical effort. Our meetings are sort of forecasted to be around every 8 to 10 weeks. With the emphasis on culturally specific codes and racial equity, and the inclusion of housing advocates, tenants' rights groups, and community-based organizations as well. By the way, there was some supplemental information I think Leslie mentioned about these 3 points here that you should have all received. If you didn't, let me know. We'll make sure that we get that out to you. And we're also open to any comments, insight, or feedback or questions that you have with this material. With respect to the community-based organizations, these are integral partners to RESI's Equitable Engagement Plan. The primary goal is to partner with 3 or 4 CBOs for community conversations on climate resilience, while we're supporting, again, Native, Black, Latinx Ed CBOs with financial and network resources. The scope of work is, while we haven't fleshed it completely out yet, we hope to convene 3 public workshops in the first budget period, contribute to the Equity Advisory or Equity Accountability Partners and the technical advisory group as well. We will offer financial support. We do have a budget for this, network access and inclusion in the RESI process. These engagements will be determined collaboratively by our CBOs, by us, the LISC team, as well as the RESI Collaborative. Some of the outcomes, just to let you all know, for the CBOs, we really want to emphasize Native organizations leading conversations on climate and resilience. We want a high degree of knowledge sharing to take place with our CBOs, and we really want to co-create, these building codes with communities that are going to be most impacted. And with that, I will turn it over to Mary with any concluding remarks before we get into any questions from the group. Mary?
Thank you, David. No, I think that's great. Thank you all so much for your partnership and attention, and we'll open up the floor. So we have a couple of different questions to kind of open up the conversation, but we're very interested in your feedback, either in the chat or just your initial feedback off, just what you're considering as you've listened.
I see a hand up. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah.
Just a clarifying question. You mentioned 3 or 4 CBOs. Is that because you'll have regional differences, like one CBO from Tucson, one from Phoenix region, one more in the north? Is that it? And then, yeah, I was more curious about the selection of those CBOs.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mark. We are trying to be as intentional as possible with the understanding that the different regions represented in the RESI project are all different, and they have not competing differences, but certainly different ones, and interests as well. So we want to be mindful of that, and we want to make sure that we're getting the right expertise and the clarity of vision for these different communities that we want to include on this in this effort.
So if I can be cheeky and do a second question, the other thing I wondered is, really there needs to be things for them to ask about. So that list of questions you want to ask them about, and things like, so I'd almost see like, here's a whole bunch of draft ideas of what we could have in the building code. Which of these are most interesting to you? Like, how about heat resilience in using materials that are better for heat, better level of insulation that reduce energy use, or EV charging, solar ready, those kind of things. So have a whole list of things that we want to bring to them, and we kind of need to prepare that in advance. Was that sort of in the work plan to kind of prepare that list of ideas that we're going to run by them, and also ask them for their ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, and thank you for asking. Yeah, we, in building the community engagement plan that we are currently working on and hope to have in the next few months, that whole set of how we should be engaging and with what materials and questions we should be engaging with these communities will be taken into consideration. Absolutely. And we invite feedback from the steering committee as far as that goes, because, when it comes to the more technical side of things and the building codes, we're not the experts. So we want to make this as collaborative a process as possible. Sorry, Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for that question. And just building on what David has already said, also making sure that we really hear the concerns of folks that are on the ground. What are the conversations they want to be having? We've already heard that in our one-on-ones with folks. So how can we really make this a collaborative, reciprocal knowledge exchange as well?
Yeah, I think in doing so, we really want to engage with folks with respect to things that are affected by building codes, but that are outside of building codes. And what I mean by that is like affordability, accessibility. Like, what are the sort of things that homeowners and tenants who are renters are thinking about that don't necessarily fall right into building codes intuitively, but that we can glean and help inform creating this regional equitable building code. Any other questions or thoughts? Well, we welcome your feedback. As I said, you know how to get a hold of us, and if you don't, Leslie can certainly point you in the right direction. But we welcome any sort of comments on this offline, in addition to as we move forward with this. And with that, thank you all for your time. And Leslie, I'll turn it back to you.
Actually, I'll interject one more question. Sorry, I'm asking all the questions today. I would actually see value as we want to adopt these codes within our communities to have the community members that we've engaged with to be, advocating for these changes that they're seeing support for. So it's almost one of the objectives, and I didn't kind of see it come to the surface there, but to actually build a coalition of community members that are there speaking to our respective councils to say, yes, we, they talk with us and we really this is really important to us. These purpose-built rentals, they don't care about energy because we're paying the energy bills, but we want to see them be efficient. So when we rent the places, we don't have these really high energy bills, that kind of commentary that would give support, because council does want to hear from these communities, but we really need to, as opposed to just hearing from them and reporting it in a stat, it'd be great having them showing up in city councils and things like that.
Mark, thanks for that. That is a very big part of this work. We call that base building work, right? So where there's actually a community organizing component to it that is very much a part of this. So thank you for bringing that to the fore. I think that's a deep part of the methodology, and agreed with you.
And Mark, I would just add that was something that was very strongly articulated by the jurisdictions when we put this proposal together. And so the focus of what David and Mary presented was really kind of this first phase of the project, but that community engagement continues throughout the whole process. So in the initial phase, we're really kind of just setting the groundwork, getting feedback, getting an understanding of what the needs, priorities, goals are of all these communities. The second phase really shifts more into, okay, here's kind of how the codes are developing, and here's our thinking around this net zero pathway, and getting them to engage and give feedback more specifically on some of the tools and resources. And then in the third phase, it really shifts more into, here's what we've done, here's the importance of it. And so actually the third period is actually the heaviest in engagement. And we've left it very flexible and indicated to DOE that this is going to be very broad in terms of like how we try to bring this information and make it accessible to different communities throughout our region. And so some of them may be more technical focused, where you're hitting more of your industry stakeholders, versus some of them are going to be more for our actual, communities who are feeling the impacts of this most directly, and let's focus more on equity. And we've got plenty of time to kind of scope out exactly how we want to go, but you're very right. I mean, that was one of the key goals here, was let's build that constituency. And that's why we're really grateful to have LISC and their team as, that equity engagement partner, and bring that intention to the forefront of the project.
Thank you.
Awesome. And that is a great kind of segue point to our next, which is discussion. So I hope that more of you will follow Mark's wonderful lead and give us your thoughts and input on this. So we're not as far along with the technical advisory committee group tag. We put it in the proposal. We don't have to call it that exactly. And so we wanted to get your thoughts in this meeting, just do kind of a bit of a brainstorm on the technical advisory committee group. I'm used to calling it technical advisory committee in my world. But the tag, we said in the proposal in our scope that we would do one or more tags, but we didn't really specify what their role was. And so we really want to start defining that, identifying the kinds of organizations, this kinds of skill sets and expertise that we want from those members, so that we can start then identifying specific individuals that we can consider for putting on the technical advisory group. So this is really meant to be open discussion. And so please feel free to come off mute. We're not doing this poll version. Come off mute and give us your thoughts, or also just feel free to put things in the chat as well. But in terms of a role for a technical body, what are your thoughts? How formal? Do you want to, kind of as Mark alluded earlier, have this be a group that just generates ideas and generates things to kind of put in the pot, or do you want this to be a more formal, voting body? At what level in terms of local to national do you want to see? So, what are folks' thoughts?
I think it should be informal, not formal.
Yeah, I think it's certainly initially and can then elect itself to become formal or something. But I think initially we need to start with some informal conversations to just get our hands around what the opportunities are. Because I think in this way it's somewhat, even when you're asking what should the tag do, well, what would you like it to do? So it's sort of, and how does it fit in? And so, but I think one of the things that I see as a need is there's very specific things about the Southwest, particularly Arizona, that we have it's different, say, than maybe NBI even has regarding what we might experience in other jurisdictions would be, what it's like on the 115 degrees, and with how are builders currently building, what are some of the materials that are green roofs don't really work here, so to speak, or in some ways, but other solutions do. And so just really getting some specific solutions that we see the building community doing here that are practical, that we can bring forward.
There's some other thoughts.
I have some questions actually. So how is the tag going to interact with the equity advisory, the equity, what did it get renamed? The EAP. Yeah, I'm curious how those two entities, I think that'll help me understand this better. And then also, I think that some of what we do, especially when we do engagement with, communities of color and folks who it's a stretch for them even to come to one meeting, let alone 10 or 12, is that knowing that some of what we're doing is more of a, the way our elected bodies work. You're a representative and you're listening, and you're also going to be at some point a representative reflecting back what you're hearing. And I feel like people in the position in the tag have a better, they're in a better position to do the sort of political lobbying and things that are going to be needed. But to expect that from some of the folks on the ground, I don't know. So I think structuring things in that way and understanding where the audience is and who you're able to reach is also an important piece of this.
David, I know you guys have given some thought to the connection between the tag and the EAP. You want to share those?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is such a great point. Thank you so much for bringing it up, Shay, because rather than just creating additional silos throughout this effort and among this project, I think we need to create a seamless sort of flow of information that will inform, almost both ways, like going both ways to inform the work, right? So, I mean, our idea, our vision is really, we would love to see a little bit of overlap with the equity accountability partners and the technical advisory group. We don't think that everybody on the technical advisory group needs to have really specific expertise from a technical perspective to be able to contribute effectively towards this effort. I think that if we have community folks who are experiencing the effect that building codes have on their livelihoods without even knowing it, but can really provide some really critical and useful knowledge and information to the TAG. I think that, first, I think it goes without saying. I think it's out there, but I think it even strengthens the value of that community engagement work by having them interface with or on the tag. So I think it sort of goes both ways. I think we should have sort of independent folks who maybe are not on the EAP interact with the tag, as well as folks who, one or two folks who are on the EAP also be involved with that. In addition to that, I would say that some of the CBOs, if not all of them, that we eventually sign on to do a lot of the community engagement work should also be on the tag, only because they will have I think the best sort of grassroots view of what people are saying and how people are talking about this, and can help sort of inform that work going forward.
So we got Clayton and then Mike. Got.
Thank you. So not absolutely directly related to what was just discussed, but kind of as an overview of my perspective of how the technical advisory group and this grant initiative as a whole can assist some of our goals in the building code realm. It's essential for us to understand how people perceive the building codes, because it wasn't that long ago. In fact, it happens almost every time there's a major catastrophe. People demand building codes, but then over time, people forget that they are the ones that actually demanded that the governments adopt these building regulations and begin to start complaining that the building regulations are inhibiting their way of life. And so it's important for me to understand what the people's current perception is, if we're going to change the dynamic of that conversation as we try to adopt more stringent codes. For example, there's a lot of buzz happening right now about the refrigerants in air conditioning. The EPA has restricted coolants and refrigerants that cause major harm to the environment. But when we talk to the HVAC contractors and the builders as a whole, they're hearing, oh my God, you're changing the way we air condition our buildings. You're making this way too expensive. Why are you doing this to us? And it's this perception, okay, of the purpose behind a lot of these codes that we need to understand if we're going to successfully convince people that it's a good thing for them. I tend to explain, or when someone asks me what I do for a living, I tell people that I protect people from themselves, because it's our job to understand the complexities of buildings and what is harmful in buildings and what potentially causes the catastrophes that people want to avoid. And so, you know, I'm really interested in the feedback from the public also, so that I can understand how they are perceiving these regulations that would appear to be more and more restrictive, inhibiting their way of life, when we're actually trying to improve their way of life.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I got to turn the speaker on, or the microphone. So going back to the original question that we were talking about, there is, how do you see the tag group? And I know Anthony chimed in, he said, you know, more open, collaborative, less formal, but I think it's going to wind up being a hybrid, where as we work towards this, you know, we're going to have more open, collaborative, but as we get to the actual construction of the code, of the amendments that we're going to bring forward, then it needs to become a little more structured, and you're going to have more use of the officials, the CBOs, the staff members who have perspective and knowledge on how to write those codes and make sure that they meet what we already have and aren't conflicting with other things within the code process.
That's a good point. Mike, can you speak a little bit, when you say hybrid, are you envisioning that the structure and composition of the tag shifts, or that it's got a broader base and maybe how people contribute?
Sure.
And who contributes shifts? I mean, could you give me just a little more thought on what you were thinking?
Sure. So I think we need to take, you a broad sweep as to what do we want to accomplish with these code modifications? You know, how do we want it to affect the Southwest? We not only have the desert Southwest, but we have the Alpine regions too engaged in this program, which are going to have different ideas. But as we get through all of that and assimilate all that data and information, we are going to have to get it down to a more factual code-based presentation to develop a final product. And I think what will happen is it's almost like a pyramid effect of this. You're going to have a few people at the top that are going to be able to put this into a code language, but we need much more broader input at the beginning to know the direction that we're going. Does that help you put it down a little bit more?
Yeah, thank you. That was great. And then we've got Anne and then Mary.
Hi, everyone. As I'm listening to folks talk through this, there were a couple ideas that surfaced that I think I'm also hearing from others. And one of the things that comes to mind for me in this is thinking about the sort of principles that we aim to honor in the pursuit of these code modifications that, you know, bring in equitable perspectives and the perspectives of the communities that are ultimately being served as a result of these modifications, but also thinking through what's technologically feasible and achievable in meeting those needs as well. And so I say that to say that I see the tag serving to some extent as a sort of a technical knowledge generation group, but also importantly, working really closely in collaboration with, and again, forgive me, I'm bad at remembering names, but the equity group. So I'll just use that as shorthand until I commit to memory new names. Really closely to define what these codes ultimately need to achieve, which I think is what Mike was getting at. Like what constitutes success in principle, so that we can then all work towards those, thank you, those definitions of success in technical code form. And I think that there's some kind of like interplay there that we're going to have to think about how to define. So, yeah. So that's mostly what I was thinking is sort of the points of intersection that we need to try to establish early so that we're all driving in the same direction. You know, and this came up as we were thinking about even just the survey work, right? Like, what are the important questions that we need to surface, and what are we trying to achieve collectively in order to ask those questions well? You know, so I'll stop there.
Thanks, Anne. I think I was next. Thank you, Anne. That's I think a segue or springboard. I appreciate your thoughts. I think I have some very pragmatic questions about tag, and I've had these questions for the last 3 months. One is, who is the holder of tag? Meaning, like, who's the person that holds the relationships and manages kind of the back end of that? Just as a very practical question, what is the definition? What is the purpose? So rather than like, what's the relationship, which I think is an absolutely important question, or who should be on it, I feel like we still need to define the actual purpose of what it does. And I think that we're trying to get to that, but I wonder if that's a more solid question. And then I believe it was Nicole in the last core meeting that brought up the rubric. I think that might be really helpful. That's something we're working on with the equity accountability partners, is really making sure that that becomes clearer and clearer. So not putting the cart before the horse, but kind of going backward. And I think where it originates from, whoever that holder is, whoever the holder of the group is, for example, LISC is going to, I think in the end, going to be able to hold the equity accountability partners. That will in large part also determine how that group unfolds and flows together.
And just quickly to respond to you, Mary, that we haven't fully answered those questions. That's kind of the key. And it's a little more challenging because the two kind of technical partners on that side are MBI and LISC. And so it's not as easy as just going, LISC, you and your team, great, you've got the expertise, run with it. So we have a follow-up conversation with ICC tomorrow. And one of the things is we're trying to get into answering these questions, or at least proposing an answer to these questions that we can bring back to you guys. But we wanted to bring as much of your thoughts and input into it. And then the goal, yes, is Nicole's rubric. Let's come with a little more formal sharing of what we're thinking, the answer to these questions, and how we want to look at the membership. But this is really great to help inform the conversation tomorrow. All right, Mark and then Kevin.
So just a couple of comments too. For under the hybrid line there, the CBO is chief building official, just because we're using CBO in two different ways here. So yeah, just kind of catching that. The other is that, I think I just wanted to echo back what we heard, that, I think as a funnel, that initially informally, because we do in the spirit of brainstorming, you don't really want to be screening out ideas. You want to kind of be open to lots of different things. And so it needs to be organic and informal. But then as you want to go towards adoption, the closer you get towards coming out with your final list, and yeah, it does need to move towards more formalized. So I think that makes sense. That was good clarification. And then the last one is just the composition of TAG. I think it is good to have some broad representation, because for one specific example would be, the whole accessibility, that if you're developing this model code, but it's not available, it doesn't have accessibility requirements included in it, then you're kind of it's not very equitable. So you want to make sure that, everyone can have, I guess, term access to a home. So all those broader requirements, although they're not technically right down related to energy, they actually are. We want to kind of include those. And I think even water conservation could be another area of technical expertise. What options are there? So and then heat resilience. So yeah, lots of different technical skills that are needed, a broad cross section of technical skills. So.
Kevin, I think you're up.
My questions I think have been asked by Mary and Catrice, if I'm saying that right. I don't know if we've met. I think I see this question on the side here about understanding how the committees work together. And I know we have the meeting tomorrow, Leslie, with ICC and MBI to sort out the actual process, the procedure, the way the technical advisory group will feed into code development. But yeah, I think I'm realizing that these are some of the questions that I also have.
Mary, did you have something else?
Oh, no. Sorry. I don't know why my hand is up. I apologize. No, I don't know how to take it off.
All right. This has been really helpful. I don't want to spend too much more time on this discussion, but and Mark, you did a really good segue in terms of thinking really broadly about the skill sets that we want to have represented on this. And you mentioned, kind of the affordability and access piece, water conservation. Are there some other specific skill sets, knowledge bases, expertise that you really feel like is important to have represented on this committee? And feel free to be as specific as you want to be on ideas.
Shay just recommended natural builders be added to the list of technical skills.
Yep, I was just getting ready to add that.
Thank you.
And there are things like flood protection and, and some very specific ones like electric vehicle charging, the kind of technical knowledge, but hopefully some of those will be covered as we want to go have the principle of electric vehicle charging, and then kind of bring in technical people as needed to kind of come up with, okay, what exactly would our specifications be for, raceways or
I think rehab work too, to me, is a very specific type of work.
Maybe HERS raters to understand air sealing and air tightness and those kind of requirements for. Utilities, good idea.
Yeah, there's a few in the chat that were already mentioned, the water conservation too.
Thanks, Shay. I'll go back through the chat too to make sure I didn't miss anything. It's a little hard to follow the conversation, follow the chat, and try to type notes as well. Anything else, folks? Well, we're going to send out a survey. A very, very brief one to all of you to give you time to kind of think about this, kind of ask these two questions again. But we're also going to ask you to start thinking about specific, ideally individuals, but if not individuals, organizations that you think fit the goal of what we want to see in the technical advisory group. And I would particularly ask for you all to think about your local resources, because we definitely want to blend, it seems like, of national, thought people, as well as, the folks that really know the local, issues and how to deal with them. And that local piece, we want to make sure, like with the CBOs, is really reflective of all the different, regions and different climatic needs, as Mike mentioned. And so think about who in your communities that you feel would be a good expert group or individual to have on here. So we'll send that out hopefully before the end of the week, and just ask for your feedback on that. So this has been a really good conversation. I appreciate everyone's input. If something occurs to you after we get off the call, shoot me an email, please, or however you want to communicate that would be really helpful. And we'll continue to answer these questions that so many of you posed and kind of work with ICC to figure out how to turn this into a formalized approach. So we've got just under 10 minutes left, and I wanted to share with you all that, so for those of you who recall, like when we were first putting the RECCE proposal together, there was a lot of desire to have a workforce development component. And we incorporated some pieces of that, including a pilot at community colleges around, tweaking their curriculum. We didn't get the full amount that we asked for in RECCE, and so we had to make some adjustments. And that pilot was the thing that made the most sense to pull out in the short term. But we always intended to go back and do a follow-up kind of phase 2 application. We are not doing this to RECCE, although, hearing that the next round of RECCE is opening up, we will definitely kind of take a look at that and evaluate it. Although the way the first round has gone, Kevin, I'm not sure I actually believe they're going to get that, open up that NOFO anytime soon. So this is actually funding under IRA. It's Christy, you probably remember it's section 15130. It's a horribly long name. There's no acronym, but it's building code related. There's about $930 million. and 400 million of it's formula funding, 530 million is competitive. The problem is because we're a home rule state, none of that formula funding is actually available to the State Energy Office of Arizona or any other home rule state. And so that pretty much leaves the competitive, and there has to be a qualifying energy code that's part of the application. And among our group, we have one organization with a qualifying energy code, and that is Scottsdale with their 2021 IECC. The 2024 that a lot of folks are working towards is not qualified yet because one, it's not finalized. It's that I think is supposed to happen next month, and then it hasn't gone through the energy analysis. But so it's a little bit of a stretch, but Tucson, I got approval. Tucson's applying on behalf of Scottsdale and the collaborative more broadly. So we're hoping that it's additionally competitive because it's not just one city, but we're really leveraging this grant and trying to say, hey, we can make the impact even bigger. And we're picking up where we left off with the community colleges. We had initial conversations, and the idea really comes down to we're going to test across the 3 main regions different approaches with specific community colleges to figure out how to get more people out of their programs that have the full qualifications and skill sets needed to ensure that we can implement our 2021 and 2024 IECCs. So they've got great programs, but they're not necessarily focused on getting people that have the necessary skill set. And this really precipitated because Anthony's been trying to hire an energy specialist plans reviewer. Mike and Tempe has been as well, and they've not been successful. So clearly there's a gap there in the workforce. And so the Southern Region Partnership, well, actually, let me start in the north. The northern region is Coconino Community College and Flagstaff, at least in terms of who we're kind of formally putting on the application. The central region is Scottsdale, Tempe, and Gateway Community College. And then in the southern region is Tucson and Pima Community College and Pima JTED. And then SWEEP and ICC will be partners as well. But we definitely want to dovetail what we're proposing there as much with this project. So we don't have to answer this question today, but I would like to think that maybe you guys either we use this steering committee to also support that grant, or we just say, okay, even though we're focusing on specific cities that either have adopted the 2021 or specifically are in the process of adopting the 2024 IECC, but the involvement's going to be a lot broader. So I wanted to bring this to you to let you know that we're moving forward, but also to say, you know, even though we've got a subset of the RECI partners as kind of the formal partners at this point, we're not trying to restrict it to that. So as this develops, if any of you are interested in participating in the proposal development discussions, let me know either in the chat or email. I'll continue to send out. So I sent out the concept paper that we submitted last Friday attached to the agenda. Please, you know, take a look at that and give any thoughts that you have. And we'll continue to keep you updated and the extent to which any of you want to get engaged in this separate grant proposal, I certainly would invite that. So any questions about this real quick before we head out?
So workforce about training people who do building on how to build more efficiently. Kind of.
Well, it's actually, it's a little more focused, and it's around the 2021 and the 2024 IECC. And it's saying those codes require like kind of an extra level of specialization. certainly for plans reviewers and, probably inspectors, but it's also going to take having an educated workforce on the design, construction, installation side. And, if we're struggling to get plans reviewers, then that says a lot about like the limited workforce that actually has that more specific qualification. And so we're not defining what that specialization needs to look like at this point. That'll be a first phase of the project, and kind of regionally say, what specific certifications, qualifications, skill sets do you want to see coming out of your associated program to meet your workforce development needs, specifically around the energy code? Does that help, Mark?
Yeah, I certainly see a need. So one need is area HERS raters to actually educate them on it. So like, and I think there's a real shortage of HERS raters. I don't know about in Tucson, but in Phoenix area, it's just so, they say they can't get them. Builders are just saying we can't get the ratings, and they're asking for exceptions because they can't find a HERS rater. Like, so.
I may reach out to you, Mark, because that's the kind of specific example that we're trying to put in here, because that's exactly what we're trying to deal with.
Yeah.
And whether it's, and that's why I say we're not trying to define exactly what certifications or specializations we're shooting for right at this point, but it'll probably be some amount of like people that have IECC/HERS specialization through ICC, or this through BPI, or whatever is kind of defined early in the project is kind of the end goal in terms of those certifications and qualifications. All right, so we got 1 minute left. Real quick, look for the surveys. We've got a couple follow-up conversations around code development and tag. I mentioned the meeting tomorrow. We're still having conversations with Pananel around the technical assistance. There was a call earlier this week. Thank you to those who took the time to help with that conversation. It's been a little painful, but we're getting there. We're moving forward with the baseline survey, so there's going to be a follow-up conversation happening there. Steering committee, I mentioned we're going to talk about options for DOE for delaying or somehow dealing with the DOE delay. Sweep's going to have a really nice presentation about a project they're involved with around workforce development training materials. And then I think we're going to have an update on the Recce project website and for potential logo, naming, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you all. It's 2 o'clock on the dot. I appreciate everyone's time and the great conversation. So look forward to follow up with you.
Thanks for your work, Leslie.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you.